Okay, welcome to a new deep dive.
Hi there.
Today, we are plunging into a story that truly challenges belief, weaving together the disappearance of a scientific titan, claims of a physics beyond our current understanding, and technology that sounds, frankly, like science fiction.
It really does. It's a
Mm.
narrative that's captivated people for decades,
Mm,
touching on shadowy government interactions and sparking questions about what might be hidden from the public eye.
yeah.
And it forces us to consider evidence that seems to defy, well, conventional explanation.
Absolutely. Our source material for this deep dive isn't just one article, but the culmination of a journalist's deep dive, a 13-year investigation by Reno Di Stefano.
13 years. Wow.
Yeah, he compiled interviews, dug through documents, gathered personal accounts, and it all led to a book on this incredible case. So we're essentially taking his extensive deep dive and trying to unpack the most compelling layers for you.
Right. We're going to navigate this complex landscape. We'll look at the established history, the astonishing claims that emerged decades later, the alleged technology, the journalist's rigorous attempts to find solid proof, and some of the stranger, harder to verify events he encountered along the way.
And when we talk about the alleged technology, the claims are immense. Clean, free energy generation on an unimaginable scale, changing one material into another.
Yeah.
Even hints of dimensional transport. Stuff that, if even partially true, could turn our world completely upside down.
It's a story where you constantly have to hold conflicting ideas in your head, really.
Oh.
You've got the seemingly solid evidence presented in the investigation,
Right.
and then the fundamental laws of physics as we currently understand them. The source itself, grapples with this tension.
Exactly. So let's lay out the path for this deep dive. We'll start with the official mystery, the vanishing point of the brilliant physicist Ettore Majorana.
Okay.
Then we'll introduce Pelizza, the man who steps forward with this extraordinary counter-narrative.
Right.
We'll get into the details of the machine itself and its claimed capabilities, the alleged involvement of governments back in the 1970s. The journalist's meticulous search for evidence, particularly forensic proof, some really bizarre claims about interference and control, and finally, what this story means on a broader, sort of human level.
Sounds like a plan.
Ready.
Let's do it. So the whole thing kicks off with Ettore Majorana. Tell us about him and why his disappearance wasn't just, a footnote in history.
Well, Ettore Majorana was a theoretical physicist of just astonishing promise. He was part of Enrico Fermi's legendary group at the University of Rome, often called the Via Panisperna Boys.
Oh, yes.
Basically, Italy's top minds in nuclear science in the 1930s. Fermi himself held Majorana in the highest regard, even suggesting he might be, well, his intellectual superior.
Wow. That's high praise from Fermi. So he was a major figure, even at a young age. What happened in 1938?
At just 31, holding a prestigious professorship in Naples, he disappeared. The official story is that he vanished after boarding a ferry in Palermo, heading back to Naples on March 27, 1938.
Just vanished.
He simply never arrived. And this wasn't just shrugged off, was it? The source mentions pretty high-level efforts to find him.
Absolutely not. His disappearance triggered a really significant search. Even Benito Mussolini took a personal interest, apparently ordering investigations.
Mussolini himself.
Yeah, and Enrico Fermi, his former colleague and friend, also actively searched, desperate to understand what had happened. But officially, he was never found.
Yay.
His fate remains one of the most enduring, unsolved mysteries of 20th century physics. Did he commit suicide? Did he voluntarily vanish? These were the prevailing questions.
And for decades, that was pretty much where the story ended. Until Majorana-Pelizza enters the picture.
Exactly. According to Pelizza's account, the mystery isn't unsolved at all. He claims that in 1958, when he was just 20 years old,
Yeah.
he had a chance encounter in a convent while he was there selling shoes, of all things.
Selling shoes. Okay.
And he met a man referred to only as the professor.
A random encounter in a convent? That's quite the beginning.
It is. And Pelizza claims this professor took him under his wing, despite Pelizza having, no formal technical background at the time, and began teaching him a physics that was completely different from anything known. A new physics.
And eventually, the professor's true identity was revealed. by Pelizza anyway.
According to Pelizza, yes.
Huh.
The professor was none other than a very much alive Ettore Majorana.
Okay, now the story takes a truly incredible turn. So Majorana's alive, teaching this guy new physics. The source delves into where this alleged mentorship took place, right? There was some confusion.
Yeah, initially Pelizza mentioned a pretty remote location, the Iberemo di Serra San Bruno in Calabria.
Okay.
But the journalist's investigation, spurred by a detail in a photo and further research, suggests a different, perhaps more plausible location for the initial long-term stay.
Hmm.
The Certosa di Calci, near Pisa, in Tuscany.
Ah, near Pisa. Why does that shift in location matter?
Well, it ties directly into Pelizza's story about the mentorship. Pelizza claimed he visited the professor numerous times over years.
Right.
Traveling to Serra San Bruno from his home would have been a grueling 12-hour drive, something like that. Makes frequent visits seem, well, incredibly difficult.
Yeah, that's a long trip.
The Certosa di Calci, however, is about a 3-hour drive. Much more feasible for regular visits,
Okay, that makes more logistical sense.
And the source suggests that when the religious order closed the Pisa convent around 1969-70, they might have transferred some residents, possibly including Majorana, to Serra San Bruno.
Ah, so that could explain why Pelizza mentioned the Serra San Bruno later.
Exactly. Could reconcile the two locations in his story.
So this alleged mentorship, potentially happening near Pisa for years, resulted in what exactly?
The core claim is the construction of a machine based on this new physics taught by Majorana, and the capabilities claimed for it are, well, frankly, astounding.
Let's get into those because they are pretty world-changing, as you said. The source outlines several key ones.
First and foremost, energy annihilation. The claim is the machine could annihilate matter, turning a tiny amount into immense, clean, free energy.
How much energy are we talking?
Pelizza specifically claimed 1 gram of iron could produce the energy equivalent of about 15,000 barrels of oil.
1 gram. 15,000 barrels.
Yeah. I mean, think about that, the potential to solve the world's energy crisis overnight.
That claim alone is staggering. But there's more, right? Matter manipulation and transmutation.
Yes. The machine could reportedly heat material and fundamentally change its composition, rearranging its subatomic structure to turn one substance into another.
Like modern-day alchemy.
Pretty much.
And the most out there claim, the one the journalist himself seemed kind of wary of.
Dimensional transport. The ability to transport matter, possibly even living beings, to another dimension and maybe back.
Okay, that's, yeah.
Yeah, the source notes the journalist largely steered away from really digging into that one, feeling it was just too fantastical compared to the other claims, which themselves stretch belief quite a bit.
Even setting aside the dimensional transport, the energy and transmutation claims are revolutionary. What did this machine supposedly look like? The source describes its physical form.
It's described as surprisingly compact, actually. A cube measuring just 52 by 52 by 52 centimeters.
That's small for that kind of power.
Yeah. Pelizza claimed it worked with nested layers, like a Russian doll, with the key mechanism in the innermost core.
And its reported power output or range.
It was allegedly capable of projecting some kind of beam up to 1,500 kilometers.
1,500 kilometers.
Yeah. And that kind of range, combined with the destructive energy potential,
It immediately brings up the military implications, doesn't it?
Absolutely, which becomes a central theme.
it really does.
Which leads us right into the claims of government involvement, specifically back in the 1970s.
Right. According to the source, in 1976, Pelizza and some associates, including a man identified as an Italian Secret Service colonel, interestingly, presented the machine to the Italian government. It was the Andreotti III cabinet at the time. They offered it as a potential energy solution for the country.
How does the government react? I mean, did they just dismiss it out of hand?
No, apparently they took it seriously enough to task a respected figure with verifying it. Professor Ezio Clementel,
Clementel? Who is he?
a physicist and head of the Italian National Committee for Nuclear Energy, or CNN, a serious player. He was assigned to test the machine and apparently set up a 4-part verification protocol.
Okay, so proper testing. And what did Clementel reportedly find?
Well, based on accounts presented in the source, tests were conducted and documented. There were videos, technical descriptions, that kind of thing.
And the conclusion?
Clementel allegedly stated that the machine could produce energy above imaginable capacities of the time. Now, this is crucial, but it's within the narrative of the claims, right?
Right, it's based on Pelizza's side of the story or his associates, but it suggests some level of official confirmation, at least as they reported it. So the Italians were involved, or at least interested. And then the Americans showed up.
Yes, interest apparently came from the U.S. State Department under President Gerald Ford. A technician named Matthew Tutino was reportedly sent to evaluate the machine.
And their proposal was pretty straightforward and massive.
According to the source, Tutino allegedly offered $1 billion.
$1 billion in the 70s. That's huge.
Colossal amount of money back then.
Yeah.
And he specifically requested a military demonstration, using the machine to destroy a satellite. He even supposedly provided the necessary target coordinates.
Wow. $1 billion in a satellite kill? That's intense. What was Pelizza's response to that?
Pelizza reportedly refused, flat out. He consistently stated that the machine was never to be used for military purposes.
Why?
He claimed this was a fundamental principle instilled by his alleged mentor, Ettore Majorana himself. So this is the central conflict here, isn't it? Incredible power and a claimed refusal to weaponize it.
So we have these extraordinary claims, alleged high-level government tests and offers, and this principled refusal to weaponize. Decades later, how does a journalist like Rino Di Stefano even begin to verify any of this? This is where his 13-year deep dive comes in, right?
Yeah, good. From 2009 onwards, Di Stefano really tried to get past the claims and find some kind of hard evidence. He spoke to many physicists about the alleged capabilities of the machine.
And what was the consensus from the scientific community he consulted? Did anyone think it was possible?
Overwhelmingly, no.
Yeah.
Known physics offers no explanation for how such a machine could work. The source mentions experts using the analogy that talking about it was like talking about Santa Claus. It's like something outside the realm of scientific possibility as currently understood. The only highly speculative theoretical idea he encountered was from one physicist suggesting a momentary magnetic monopole might be involved.
A magnetic monopole.
Yeah, but that's purely hypothetical. It's not a validated scientific principle explaining this. The source really emphasizes there's a complete lack of scientific documentation explaining the machine's operating principle. Just nothing concrete on the how.
Okay, so from a conventional physics standpoint, it sounds impossible. But the journalist also pursued other types of evidence, specifically regarding the huge claim that Majorana was still alive all those years.
Yes, and this is where the investigation presents its most potentially compelling findings, arguably. Pelizza provided Di Stefano with photographs and letters he claimed were from Ettore Majorana.
Photos and letters. Dating from when?
Spanning decades. From 1964 well into the 2000s.
Decades after he vanished in 38. And Di Stefano had these forensically analyzed.
Yes, and he specifically sought out top-level professionals for this. He commissioned calligraphic analysis of the letters and photographic analysis of the photos. Very thorough.
Okay, let's start with the letters. What did the handwriting analysis find?
Dr. Chantal Serra, a forensic graphologist who works for the court in Pavia, so a serious expert, conducted multiple analyses on the letters Pelizza provided. She compared them to verified examples of Majorana's handwriting from the 1930s.
And her conclusion?
Her conclusion, as reported in the source, was incontrovertible.
It was controvertible.
That was the word used, that the letters were written by Ettore Majorana.
Incontrovertible is a very powerful word for a forensic expert to use in a report, isn't it? It leaves very little room for doubt from that specific analysis perspective.
It really does.
What about the photos? Were they analyzed too?
Yes. Engineer Michele Viciello, based in Brescia, conducted a detailed photographic analysis using advanced digital comparison techniques. His extensive report concluded that the individuals in the photos Pelizza provided didn't just resemble Majorana. The photos belonged to Ettore Majorana. He found a level of similarity and correlation points that, in his expert opinion, made it impossible they were pictures of a different person just looking similar.
So just to be clear, you have independent expert forensic reports stating that documents and photos created decades after Majorana's 1938 disappearance were, with extremely high certainty, produced by Ettore Majorana himself.
That's what the source presents, yes. This is put forward as the strongest evidence supporting the truly extraordinary claim of his survival.
Wow.
Exactly. And the source highlights the profound implication. If these forensic analyses are accurate, Ettore Majorana was alive and active well into his 80s, 90s.
Maybe even past 100.
Potentially, yeah. Given his birth year of 1906 and the claimed dates of some of these documents extending into the early 2000s, while skepticism about the machine claims is understandable, the source argues these forensic findings are incredibly difficult to just explain away.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. Beyond the evidence for Majorana's survival, the journalist also looked into Pelizza's claims about the machine's capabilities, like transmutation. The source mentions a specific video from 1992.
Yes, a video allegedly filmed in a garage workshop in Spain, I think.
Hmm.
It appears to show Pelizza using the machine on a cube of foam. Yeah, and after a bright flash, the cube seems to have transformed into a metallic material, which he claimed was gold.
He turned foam into gold on video. And was this video itself verified?
Yes, 2 expert analyses were commissioned, and both concluded the video had not been manipulated. So what you see happening on the recording is what was actually filmed at that time.
Okay, so the video isn't a hoax in terms of like visual effects or editing, but does that scientifically prove transmutation happened?
And the source is very careful here. It acknowledges the video is an uncontrolled, unverified demonstration.
Right. No independent scientists measuring things.
Exactly. Without independent observers taking measurements and analyzing the material before and after, the video serves as an illustration of the claim, but not as definitive scientific proof of transmutation. It shows something happened on camera, but not scientifically what it was.
Was there any detail in the video that offered even a tiny bit of corroboration, maybe?
There's one potentially intriguing detail mentioned in the source. Pelizza claimed the transformed cube was gold, right? If a cube of that approximate size, estimated at 15 centimeters on a side, were solid gold, it would weigh around 65 kilograms.
That's heavy.
Very. The video shows Pelizza placing the allegedly transmuted cubes on an old balance scale, and the scale registers a weight around 65 kilograms. The source points to this as the only potentially corroborating detail within the video itself, while still stressing it's far from conclusive scientific proof.
Okay. Still just an anecdote within the video, essentially.
Pretty much. Other claimed transmutations are mentioned too, like turning Spanish coins into silver, apparently seen in a video with another Italian journalist, Vittorio Feltri, or transforming a Swiss coin shown on Swiss television. But again, uncontrolled demonstrations.
The journalist also had a personal encounter with something claimed to be transmuted gold, didn't he? A medallion?
Yes, in March 2021, Pelizza reportedly gave Di Stefano a small medallion, a Madonna del Miracolo, claiming it was transmuted gold. The journalist noted it felt unusually heavy. When weighed, it was 7.61 grams, which is significantly heavier than typical commercial ones of that size, which might be around 3.5 grams.
Interesting. And the critical detail about this medallion, what made it stand out legally?
It completely lacked any legal manufacturing or carat marks, no official stamps.
And why is that important?
The source highlights that under Italian law, any professional jeweler or metallurgist who encounters unmarked gold is legally obligated to seize it and report it to the police.
Because?
Because it signals an illegal origin, essentially. Gold that hasn't gone through legal channels, hasn't been taxed, assayed properly. So this detail, the source argues, could support the idea that the gold didn't come from a conventional legal source. If it was genuinely transmuted, it wouldn't have those marks, implying it wasn't produced legally.
Another piece fitting the narrative, but still not definitive proof of transmutation itself.
Exactly. It's suggestive within the context of the story.
Okay. Beyond the machine and the claims of its power, Pelizza also consistently spoke about being subject to external control and harassment, right?
Yes, this is a really recurring theme throughout his accounts over the years. He frequently claimed American controllers, sometimes identified as CIA, actively interfered with his attempts to work with the technology. He alleged they forbade experiments, sometimes confiscated machines he built, and sometimes provided him with money, maybe to keep him quiet or inactive.
Did the journalist, Di Stefano, encounter anything himself that hinted at this kind of surveillance or control?
The source recounts instances where Di Stefano perceived what he felt were warnings or subtle signs of surveillance during his investigation.
Like what?
A striking example he gives is receiving a phone call on a train while traveling to meet Pelizza. The caller seemed to have specific knowledge of his private travel plans and destination, which he hadn't shared widely. It felt like a deliberate signal, we know where you're going.
Creepy. The source also mentions a specific incident near the end of Pelizza's life that involved another attempt to build a machine and alleged intervention.
Yes, this was apparently in late 2021. According to the account, Pelizza and a young collaborator built another machine in a cellar somewhere.
Another one. Okay.
Yeah. And this machine was reportedly confiscated. What makes this particular incident stand out in the narrative is the claim that both Pelizza and the collaborator were allegedly taken to a villa outside Milan and explicitly warned against any further attempts to rebuild the machine.
So potentially two witnesses this time.
Exactly. The source presents this as the first reported instance where there were two alleged witnesses to such a direct intervention, not just Pelizza's word.
Still hard to verify externally, though.
Oh, absolutely. Like so much of this.
The source also notes other claims made by Pelizza that are maybe even harder, perhaps impossible to verify independently.
Right. He spoke of an alleged U.S. government contract for using the technology for environmental remediation, cleaning up pollution, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he blamed problems with that contract on individuals he called John 1 and John 2, supposedly from the CIA.
John 1 and John 2.
Yeah. And he also claimed to have met U.S. President George W. Bush inside the Vatican at some point.
Met President Bush in the Vatican.
That was the claim. The source acknowledges that these specific claims are virtually impossible to corroborate through independent means. They exist primarily within police's personal narrative.
Right. Stepping back from all the incredible claims and the attempts at verification, what was the journalist's overall impression of Rolando Pelizza as a person after spending so much time investigating him?
The source portrays Pelizza as fundamentally a good person, someone with strong ethical principles, particularly that core stance against the military use of the technology.
Not a con artist.
The journalist's personal interactions led him to believe Pelizza was not a con artist, simply trying to defraud people. Which, of course, adds a layer of complexity, doesn't it? You contrast the seemingly sincere character of the man with the extraordinary and often scientifically unverified nature of his claims.
Definitely. And despite claiming access to a technology that could generate immense wealth, or at least attract huge investment, Pelizza didn't seem to live like someone with access to unlimited resources.
That's another point the source raises as an apparent contradiction. An example given is Pelizza needing financial assistance late in life to see a medical specialist for a really severe jaw infection that was affecting his eye.
An infection.
Yeah, one he said he'd had for years, dating back to when he was allegedly working for Americans and taking strong antibiotics.
The source even speculates on this medical issue, linking it potentially to the machine.
Well, the journalist sort of considers whether the persistent jaw infection could potentially be linked to unknown energy exposure from the machine itself. It's pure speculation, of course.
Right.
But he draws a parallel to historical accounts, even stretching back to biblical stories like the Ark of the Covenant, where interactions with powerful, unexplained phenomena were said to have physical consequences for those exposed. Radiation sickness before radiation was understood.
Interesting parallel. Speaking of historical parallels, the source makes some broader comparisons regarding the machine's alleged power, doesn't it?
Yes, the machine's claimed ability to project a beam that could annihilate targets. It's compared to the destructive power attributed to the Ark of the Covenant in certain interpretations.
Okay.
Or maybe more recently, to Nikola Tesla's concept of a death ray, a directed energy weapon. It really highlights that potentially devastating military aspect that Pelizza claimed to resist.
And how does the lack of a conventional scientific explanation for this claimed power fit into those historical or almost mythological comparisons?
Well, the source points out that throughout history, when humanity has encountered phenomena that couldn't be explained by the understanding of the time,
Yeah.
they've often been attributed to concepts like magic or divine intervention or forces beyond rational comprehension. This story, with its claims of technology completely defying known physics, kind of touches on that boundary, doesn't it? Between the explainable and the seemingly miraculous or even supernatural. It really does push those boundaries. And finally, the source brings this story, which originates way back in the 20th century, right into the present day with a recent announcement.
Yes, the journalist notes the recent U.S. announcement about developing a super laser weapon capable of annihilating matter.
A super laser.
Yeah. Now, conventional high-power lasers require massive power sources and infrastructure, right?
Sure.
Achieving similar destructive power, actual matter annihilation in a compact form factor, maybe something you could put on a missile, remains a significant scientific challenge according to current physics.
So the journalist saw a connection.
He saw resonance there with some of Pelizza's claims about his machine's compact size, that 52-centimeter cube, and its powerful matter-annihilating beam. It suggests that research into such high-energy directed weapons is still very much a frontier, even if the claimed mechanisms differ vastly from known science. So, looking at this entire complex story, the vanished genius, Majorana, the man with the counterclaims, Pelizza, the alleged revolutionary machine, the government interactions, the journalist's long investigation, the compelling forensic findings. The strange incidents, what's the core dilemma the source leaves us with?
I think it's the striking contrast, isn't it, between the existence of robust, independently verified forensic evidence, the handwriting and photographic analyses that strongly supports the extraordinary claim of Ettore Majorana's survival long after he officially disappeared,
Right, that hard-to-dismiss evidence.
versus the claims about a revolutionary, world-altering machine and high-level government interference, which remained largely difficult or impossible to verify through independent scientific means or corroborating testimony outside of police's immediate circle.
Our mission in this deep dive was really to present this complex story based on the journalist's expensive investigation, laying out the findings and the evidence he gathered.
And to allow you, the listener, to weigh that evidence against the significant doubts that naturally arise when confronted with claims that defy our fundamental understanding of physics and reality. It's a real puzzle.
It absolutely leaves you with some profound questions to consider. If such knowledge or technology were real, who should control it? How would it completely transform our world, for better or maybe for worse?
And perhaps the most intriguing question, does the inherent difficulty in verifying these claims mean they are simply baseless? Or could it, as some speculate, actually be evidence of powerful forces actively working to keep such potentially world-altering knowledge hidden from the public sphere?
It really leaves you wondering what secrets might truly exist, perhaps just beyond the reach of mainstream science and public knowledge. For anyone wanting to explore this further, the source material for this deep dive is based on journalist Rino Di Stefano's extensive investigation detailed in his book, Il caso Majorana-Pelizza.
A deep dive into a deep dive indeed. A fascinating rabbit hole.
And a truly fascinating and ultimately unresolved mystery.